Hey, good evening, everybody. We're still just kind of sort of somewhat getting set up here. So just bear with us for a moment or two or three.
Yeah, we have a new device holding that we're trying to get the right look with.
We'll see if it works. Hopefully it'll work. I mean, it is working.
Hopefully it works the way we want it to work.
Hopefully you can see us. I think you can see us.
It just means there's no leaning back as far as we normally do.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
One thing at a time.
Thus the lumbar support.
Hey, that's me.
Yes, it is you.
So, almost there. But yeah, hope everybody's doing okay. Long time no see. This is the first time that we've done back-to-back weeks in quite a while.
Yes.
But
that's what the schedule allowed for.
And this is going to be the last time you see us this month, at least in doing this, because we're doing back-to-back weeks because we have a very busy month ahead and
2 weeks of back-to-back travel for him.
Yep. So
I'll be holding down the fort on the second one.
Beth doesn't want to do Facebook Live by herself.
Beth understands there's going to be some technical issues. Just saying. He's the tech guy.
That's terrifying. If you know anything about me, that's terrifying. But hope that you all are doing well, and I appreciate you taking your time, spending a little bit of time with us as we talk about some more spooky stuff, because, well, that's what we love to do here. And spooky stuff for tonight. We are going to Big Sky Country.
Yeah, we're going to Montana.
Yeah. And
yes,
here comes
we do
Buddy
have
Boy.
Vincent.
Mr. Vincent's here.
He was crying because, again, he's still recovering from his surgery. And so he still gets separated at meal times at certain points. And he was not happy that we were setting up without him and he couldn't be here for his loving audience.
Yeah. So, but here he is now. So he can do what Vincent can do Vincent things, and we can do our show. But yeah, so Haunted Montana. And for myself, I went and I checked out, what they drink in Montana. And they do have some local whiskey and local beer, which is local to Montana, which is not Virginia. So we don't have local Montana stuff here. But apparently they do like their whiskey and their bourbon, stuff like that.
They're old fashions.
Old-fashioned as an excellent drink of choice in Montana, as it is in many places. So that's what I'm partaking in tonight.
I have Di-Serrano.
Cheers.
Cheers. And hi, Dana.
So, yeah, let's go ahead. Let's dive right in, shall we?
Yes.
But, yeah, and it looks like, yes, hello, everybody. Bear with me in the comments again, because I don't know what's going on, but Facebook does not want to show me your
rude
comments as you are actually commenting, so I have to go back and refresh the page every so often. But
and for those of you that just missed it, I just got attacked by Vincent.
I don't know what his
apparently
word is.
Putting my hand on my knee
was too close to his face.
Close.
But yes, hi Dana. Glad you could tune in this evening.
So.
But cat things, just cat things.
Cat things. Catitude.
So. Big Sky Country makes sense. Montana, it's really a place that's defined by distance. There's wide valleys, empty roads, towns that rose quickly and sometimes faded out just as fast. It's a landscape that feels open, almost endless, like there's nothing out there but sky, wind, and memory.
And a lot of times that's the absolute truth.
But that openness can be deceiving. Because in a place this vast, stories don't disappear. They settle in, they take hold in the quiet corners, in mountain passes, along forgotten trails, inside buildings that have seen more than they were ever meant to hold. Some of these stories are violent, some are deeply personal, and a few are surprisingly gentle. Across Montana, people have reported footsteps in empty rooms, voices where no one stands, and figures that appear just long enough to be noticed before fading back into the spaces they seemed to know so well. Not all of them are trying to be seen, but every now and then they are. Tonight, we're traveling across the state of Montana, exploring places where history and memory overlap, and where, if the stories are true, something still lingers in between.
So just outside of Bozeman, there is, of course, an area that's tucked right into the foothills of the Bridger Range, and this is known as Bear Canyon. It is the kind of place people return to again and again. In the winter, it draws skiers to the slopes. In the summer, hikers and campers will fill the trails and grounds, drawn to the easy access to the outdoors and the quiet beauty of the surrounding forest. Bear Canyon Campground, in particular, stays busy through the warmer months, and its campsites are rarely empty for long. On the surface, there's nothing about it that feels unusual. But like many places in the American West, Bear Canyon carries more history than it first lets on. Its recorded past stretches back to the late 1800s when the Cooper sawmill brought the industry into the canyon. Decades later, in the early 1940s, a ski area was developed, adding a new layer of activity to the landscape that had already seen its share of hard labor and isolation. Nearby, remnants of Fort Ellis and scattered homesteads hint at the lives that lived on the edge of the wilderness. And for some, not all those lives seem to have fully moved on. Are you reading, Sir Nico? The most persistent stories center on a figure that at first glance doesn't seem threatening at all. It's a little girl. She's most often described as wearing a white dress, appearing along the Bear Canyon Road or near its campground itself. Witnesses say she looks lost, alone. The kind of sight that instinctively will draw concern. And that's perhaps the point. According to multiple accounts, the girl doesn't simply appear. She engages. She calls out, and in some cases, she calls people by name. And more often than not, she seems to focus her attention on the women, attempting to coax them away from their cars, their campsites, or the trail itself. Those who have followed her describe a strange, disorienting experience. A girl leads them deeper into the woods, away from any clear path, and then without warning, she vanishes, leaving them alone, often in the dark, and no clear sense of how they came to be there. What is she, or was she, depends on whom you ask. Some believe that the story reflects a tragedy, that a girl was killed somewhere in or near the canyon and now seeks help from those she trusts most. In that version, her behavior is desperate, not malicious. Others, they're not so sure. There are those who believe the figure is something else entirely, a darker presence using the image of a child to lower defenses and draw people in. A mimic, something that understands just enough about human instinct to use it. And the girl isn't the only thing reported here. Drivers along nearby roads have described seeing a second figure, an older, weathered man, trudging through the snowstorms with his head down. As if he's locked in an endless journey, he appears briefly and disappears back into the storm. Some connect him to the early days of the canyon, the logging camps, to soldiers, to men who lived and worked in these unforgiving conditions. Others who have spent time in the canyon describe hearing their names called when no one else is there. Some catch the faint smell of cigarette smoke drifting through the otherwise clean mountain air. Even a few report receiving strange phone calls filled with nothing but static in a place where the cell phone service barely exists. And occasionally there are whispers of something even larger moving through the trees. But those stories tend to fade quickly. Because in Bear Canyon, most people don't come looking for monsters. They come for the outdoors, for the quiet, for a night under the stars. Most of the time, that's what they get. But every so often, someone sees a figure just off the road, or hears a voice where there shouldn't be one, or feels that subtle pull to step just a little further into the woods than they originally intended. And if that happens, if you find yourself being led away from the trail, following something that doesn't quite make sense, it might be worth asking yourself a simple question. Are you helping her? Or is she leading you somewhere you never meant to go?
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Hi, buddy.
Now, that said, not every place on Montana hides its past in the trees. Some of it lingers out in the open, along the roads people still travel today. High in the mountains, west of Helena, where the road climbs toward the Continental Divide, MacDonald Pass feels like a place built for movement. Travelers pass through, hikers come and go, weather rolls in quickly and disappears just as fast. It's a place defined by crossing from one side to the other. But not every story here moves on so easily. Long before modern highways cut across the pass, this was an important route between Helena and Deer Lodge. In the late 1860s, a French-Canadian road builder named Constant Gouyer carved out what became known as Frenchwoman's Road, creating a more direct path through the mountains. It was a practical route, a necessary one. And like many such places in the West, it came with a cost. Gouyer operated a hay ranch along the Little Blackfoot River while his wife, Madame Gouyer, managed a small roadside hostel near Dog Creek. Travelers could stop for the night, pay a modest fee, and continue on their way the next morning. By all accounts, it was a simple but welcome refuge in an otherwise unforgiving landscape. But behind that quiet operation, there were signs of trouble. Constant Gouyer had a reputation as a violent drunk, and those who passed through the area were aware that life at the hostel was not always peaceful. In August of 1868, that tension came to a breaking point. Madame Gouyer was found murdered inside the hostel, robbed of the gold dust she had been keeping, reportedly thousands of dollars worth. The details were grim, but the conclusion was clear enough. Someone had killed her and taken the money. Suspicion fell quickly on Constant. He was never formally charged, but he didn't stay to defend himself either. Not long after her death, he fled the territory and disappeared from the story entirely. According to accounts from the time, Madame Gouyer had been saving that money with the hope of leaving, of returning to France and starting over. If that was true, it raises an unsettling possibility that she came very close. Today, nothing remains of the hostel. The structure is gone, the road is shifted, and the landscape has reclaimed what was once there. But the story, like many places like this, didn't end. The first known sighting came in 1877 when a physician traveling through the area reported seeing a woman near the site of the old hostel. He kept the experience to himself for years, only sharing it late in his life. Not long before his death, under difficult circumstances, before his death, under difficult circumstances. Since then, others have claimed similar encounters, brief glimpses of a woman where no one should be, lingering just long enough to be noticed. She has come to be known simply as the Frenchwoman, and she is not alone. In a separate story tied to the past, a driver once stopped near a white roadside cross. When he returned to his car, he found a young woman sitting quietly in the back seat, asking for a ride to Helena. He agreed, but somewhere along the drive, she vanished. The cross, it turns out, marked the site of a fatal accident. 2 teenage girls killed on their way to a dance. Different stories, different spirits, same stretch of road. Today, hikers can still cross the pass, starting near the Cromwell-Dixon campground and following the Continental Divide Trail as far as they like. It's a beautiful route, the kind that invites you to slow down and take it all in. And for the most part, that's exactly what people do. But MacDonald Pass has always been a place of passage, a place where people come through and sometimes don't quite leave. So if you find yourself crossing that divide, on foot or by car, you might want to keep an eye on the road behind you. And if someone happens to be sitting in your back seat, you may want to think twice before offering them a ride.
Now, it's in places like MacDonald Pass that the pass feels different. In Montana's early towns, history had a way of unfolding much more publicly. So we're going to go over to one of the early cities of Montana's gold rush. And during this time, justice was often as rough as the men who were chasing their fortunes. We're in Virginia City. Along Grasshopper Creek and Alder Gulch, boom towns like Bannock and Virginia City filled in almost overnight. With that growth came violence, theft, and a level of lawlessness that outpaced any formal authority. Before Montana became a territory in 1864, the responsibility for order fell to the people themselves. So, the Vigilante Committee was formed. They acted swiftly, decisively, and George Ives was the first to hang. Others follow, men accused of robbery and of murder, including Hayes Lyons, Moon Helm, Frank Parrish, George Lane, Jack Gallagher, and eventually Jack Slade. Joseph Jack Slade was not an easy man to define. Some saw him as reckless, even dangerous, a man prone to sudden violence and especially when drink took hold. Others remember something else entirely. He had moments of loyalty, even heroism. He could be generous, protective, the kind of man who might rescue somebody in one moment and terrorize a room in the next. A Jekyll and Hyde figure, long before the term actually existed. And standing beside him through all of this was his wife, Virginia. She was striking as she was formidable. Tall, raven-haired woman known to carry a revolver beneath her skirt and ride as hard as any man in the territory. The two of them were a spectacle, racing horses through the streets, living loudly in a town that already had more than enough noise. But even Virginia could not outrun what was coming. After one night of a particularly destructive behavior, the Vigilance Committee made its decision. There would be no long deliberation, no drawn-out process, and Jack Slade would hang. They knew Virginia would fight it, so they moved quickly. The noose was placed, and the crowd gathered, and word spread through the town. Someone ran to warn her. Hoofbeats began to thunder in the distance, and then from the crowd a voice rang out, "Mrs. Slade is coming!" For a moment, everything seemed to pause. Then the box beneath Jack's feet was kicked away, and silence followed. Then came the sound of a horse at full gallop, racing too late through a cloud of dust that Virginia rode into town, just in time to see what had already been done. She would go on to remarry, but not for long. Those who knew her knew she was not easily lived with. Some claim only the devil himself could manage it. But Virginia never left that moment behind. Stories suggest otherwise. Even now, there are those who claim to see her, a rider in black moving fast across open ground, skirt billowing out behind her, the sound of hooves breaking the stillness, always heading toward town, always too late, always arriving just in time to lose him again.
And just as the violence of the gold rush began to settle, Montana slowly started to take shape in a different way. Not just as a place to strike it rich, but as a place to build something lasting. Long before Montana's gold rush towns rose and fell, there were men who made their living on the land, quietly, steadily, and far from the frenzy of mining camps. In the wide open valleys near present-day Deer Lodge, cattle ranching took hold early. Among those who shaped it was Richard Grant, who along with his sons built a substantial herd by trading with immigrants moving west along the Oregon Trail. By 1859, the Grants had established a permanent home in the region, laying the foundation for what would become one of Montana's most significant ranches. But life on the frontier was rarely stable. In the years that followed, misfortune found the Grants again and again. Much of their herd was driven off. A barn was lost to fire. Supplies were seized. By the mid-1860s, it had become clear that holding onto the ranch would be difficult. So in 1866, the property passed into the hands of a friend, Grant-Kohrs. Under Kohrs, the ranch did more than survive. It expanded. Kohrs, along with his partner, John Billenberg, built the operation into a sprawling cattle empire. After returning east to marry, Kohrs brought his wife, Augusta, back to Montana, where the two made the ranch their home. In time, that house was enlarged, the operation refined, and the ranch became a centerpiece of Montana's cattle industry, worked, lived in, and passed down through generations. Today, that legacy is preserved at the Grant-Kohrs Ranch National Historic Site, maintained by the National Park Service as a living snapshot of the 19th century West. But preservation, it seems, has extended beyond buildings and fences. Visitors and staff alike have long reported experiences that suggest the ranch is not entirely quiet. Some of those moments feel less like hauntings and more like echoes. On one occasion, a rancher checked a secure building and found a door standing open, despite having been locked earlier. Inside, he heard voices. Calm, familiar, the sound of men talking as they worked. He could make out the rhythm of a simple task, grain being scooped, a bucket filling. Except there was no grain, and no one was there. The sounds faded as naturally as they'd begun, leaving behind only the empty structure and the sense that something routine had just taken place, just out of reach. Other encounters feel more personal. After a long and exhausting stretch of work, one ranger sat alone inside the main house, overwhelmed by the quiet weight of the day. As she rested on the stairs, a soft scent began to drift through the air. Lavender, faint but unmistakable. It lingered gently, wrapping the space in something calm and familiar. It was the same scent often associated with Grant-Kohrs, known to have kept lavender among her belongings. Whether memory or presence, the effect was the same. It comforted. Across the ranch, stories continued to surface. An alarm sounding without cause, the voice of a child where no child stands, a handprint appearing on a mirror then vanishing just as quickly. Different moments, different impressions, different lives perhaps, still touching the place they once knew. Today, the ranch remains open year-round, inviting visitors to step into the rhythms of another time, where cattle still graze, buildings still stand, and the past feels closer than it should. And if, while you're there, you happen to hear voices drifting from an empty space or catch the faint scent of something familiar in the air, you may not be imagining it. You may simply be sharing the ranch with those who never quite left.
As Montana grew, so did the need for something beyond survival. People just didn't want to live here. They wanted places to gather. So we're going to go to one of the most popular places to gather, the theater. It's where I like to go when we can.
The theater.
Yep. So this is Fort Peck Summer Theater. It's in the open stretches of northeastern Montana and a town that wasn't supposed to last. Fort Peck rose almost overnight in the 1930s, built to house thousands of workers tasked with constructing the massive Fort Peck Dam, one of the largest earth-filled dams in the world. It was a place defined by urgency, ambition, and the kind of scale that makes even landscape feel temporary. And yet, some things endured here. In 1938, at the height of that boom, Fort Peck Theater was constructed as part of the Works Progress Administration. Designed in the sleek, forward-looking Art MacDonald style, the theater stood as a symbol of progress, a place where workers and their families could gather, escape, and be entertained after a long day out the dam. It wasn't just a theater, it was a lifeline. Movies flickered across its screen, traveling performers took its stage, music, laughter, and applause filled the space night after night. Unlike so many small-town theaters that faded with time, this one held on. Today, it still operates as a non-profit cultural center, drawing crowds each summer for performances that range from classical musicals to modern productions. But if you ask the people who spend time there, really spend time there, they'll tell you something else has a hold on it too. And the stories don't come all at once. They rarely do. It starts small. The footsteps where there shouldn't be any. A door that opens, then closes, without anybody nearby. Lights flickering, just enough to make you wonder if it's the wiring or timing. Backstage, objects shift overnight. In the dressing rooms, people hear movement when the building is empty. And then, in the quiet moments, especially in the projection booth along the balcony, there's a persistent feeling that somebody's watching you. It's not threatening, it's just there. Over time, those scattered experiences begin to point towards a single figure, a man simply known as Red. No one can say for certain who Red is, but the local tradition holds that he may have been a projectionist or an early worker tied to the theater in its very early days. Others connect him to something even earlier, a construction accident, a man who fell and died while the building was actually going up. Either way, the image is consistent. A man in 1930s work clothes, seen briefly, and then gone just as quickly. If this were a darker story, that might be where things take a turn. But Red, by most accounts, is just not here to cause problems. He's just there.
Engaged.
Yep. What's going on? That's what he's doing. I forgot to silence my phone.
Staff members have long joked that activity seems to pick up during rehearsals and performances, as if Red enjoys the show just as much as anyone else. Lights flicker at just the right moment. Sounds echo through the theater like someone moving into position. And if he's still there, he doesn't seem to be haunting the place. He seems to be attending. And in a town that once existed for a single purpose, in a building that was meant to bring people together, there's something oddly fitting about that. Because at the Fort Peck Theater, the curtain still rises, the audience still gathers, and if you happen to notice something just out of place, a sound, a shadow, a figure lingering where no one should be, well, it might just mean the house is a little fuller than you thought. Now, not all of those places were meant for crowds. Some of the most lasting stories settled into homes, where life played out quietly day by day. In Billings, set back from the street behind manicured grounds and quiet confidence, the Moss Mansion stands as a reminder of a different era. Completed in 1903, it was home to the Moss family for more than 80 years. Preston Boyd Moss, known as PB, had brought his family west from Missouri in 1892, quickly establishing himself as president of the First National Bank. The house that followed reflected that success, elegant, modern for its time, and built to last. And in many ways, it has. But like so many historic homes, it also holds onto something less tangible. 6 members of the Moss family died within its walls. Among them was Virginia Moss, the youngest child of PB and Maddie. Born in the home in 1902, she died just 6 years later of diphtheria. A brief life that seems to have left a lasting impression. Today, many believe Virginia never truly left. Most of the activity centers around the grand staircase leading to the second floor, where Virginia spent her final days. Visitors and staff have reported a faint blue orb hovering along the landing, lingering in the space as if uncertain whether to move on or stay. Others describe something more defined. During a theatrical production held inside the mansion, multiple cast and crew members reported seeing the outlines of a young girl peeking from behind the staircase, watching, then disappearing when noticed. Not threatening, just curious.
Hey, what's going on?
And then there are the quieter moments. In one upstairs bedroom, a rocking chair has been seen moving on its own, not abruptly or violently, just a slow, steady motion as if someone small had recently climbed down and left it behind. Even during periods when the house was filled with heat and mechanical noise, the movement remained consistent. Skeptics have spent time here. Some leave unchanged. Others don't. Perhaps the most telling moment came in the summer of 2019. 2 visitors paused on the staircase for a photo. Their phone's face recognized feature locked onto them instantly. 2 clear boxes framing their faces. And then a third box appeared, at the height of a child. When they shifted positions, the box followed, as if someone else had stepped into the frame. If the stories are true, Virginia Moss doesn't seem interested in frightening anyone. She lingers where she once lived, where she once played, where her life was cut short. And every now and then, she just wants to be included.
And sometimes those homes become something more, not just a place to live, but a place that people were remembered. So let's go back to Virginia City, and a history that doesn't quite sit quietly. It lingers on the boardwalks, it settles into the timbers of the old buildings, it echoes through the streets that once carried the weight of a gold rush boomtown. In places like this, stories don't just fade away. They stay close. They pass from one generation to the next until the line between memory and presence becomes harder to define. And among those stories, a few names carry as much warmth as Mary Elling. Mary arrived in Virginia City as a young woman in the 1860s when the town was still finding its footing. She met Henry Elling there, a German immigrant who had come west with little and built something remarkable. By the 1870s, Henry had become one of the wealthiest men in the region. His success was tied to mining, baking, and the land. Together, they built a home in 1876, a mansion by local standards, but more importantly, a place that was meant to be lived in. And lived in it was. The Ellings raised a large family here, welcoming guests, raising children, and becoming fixtures of the community. When Henry died in 1900, he left behind a considerable fortune. Mary could have withdrawn from public life. There we go.
Yeah.
Instead, she expanded. She funded the construction of St. Paul's Episcopal Church and enlarged the family home, adding a grand ballroom along with the rooms designed not for solitude, but for gatherings. For the next 2 decades, the Elling's house became known as a place of music, conversation, and celebration. It didn't matter who you were, wealthy or struggling, local or passing through. Mary made room for you. Those who wrote about her remember... when she died on Christmas Eve in 1924, the town felt it. Those who wrote about her remembered her as a woman who carried herself with a quiet grace, whose presence remained gentle even in death, as if she had simply come to rest with the same beauty she had created in life. Over time, the house changed. Ownership passed, maintenance slipped, and much like Virginia City, the Elling house fell into a period of decline. And with that decline came something unexpected, a sense that the house was not entirely empty. In the 1970s, a curator working for the area began noticing strange patterns. Windows of the old house were being broken, but not from the outside. The glass scattered outwards, as if something inside had forced its way through. Believing somebody might be entering through the ballroom, he decided to seal the door. But then he raised his hammer to drive the first nail, and something stopped him. Not a sound, not a warning, a hand on his wrist. Firm enough to halt the motion entirely. He pulled back, shaken, waited, and tried again. I don't know about you. Once would have been enough. But he was stopped a second time. Whatever occupied that house did not want that door closed. It was a rare moment, a sharp one, and for a long time after, he chose not to return.
Smart man.
Years later, during renovations, another quieter interaction unfolded. Workers left behind books of wallpaper samples in the ballroom. When they returned, one book lay open to a floral pattern. They closed it, and they went on with their work. The next day, the same book was open again, to the same page. Curious now, they deliberately placed it at the bottom of the stack, and it reappeared the next day.
Open and waiting.
When the walls were eventually stripped back to their original layers, the reason became clear. The pattern in the book matched the original wallpaper of the ballroom exactly. It's difficult to say what, if anything, remains in the Elling house, but if Mary's still there, the story suggests she's not changed very much. She does not frighten. She does not drive people away. She corrects. She guides. She perseveres. The house was always meant to be a place of gathering, of beauty, of shared experience, and perhaps even now she's simply making sure it stays that way. Because in Virginia City, some hosts never really stopped welcoming guests.
Good hosts.
Good hosts.
Kudos to them. In Virginia City, those memories take many forms. Some feel like a welcome. Others feel more like a responsibility. In Virginia, the past is not a gentle thing. This was a gold rush town, but built quickly and often violently. In the early 1860s, a vigilante justice took hold here, and more than 20 men were hanged in the span of a single year. Beyond that, the dangers of mining life ensured that not everyone who came seeking fortune lived long enough to spend it. It is, in other words, the kind of place where ghost stories almost feel inevitable. And many of them follow a familiar pattern: restless figures, violent ends, echoes of unfinished business. But not all of them. Just beyond the main thoroughfare stands a building that once served a very different purpose. Today operates as the Bonanza Inn, but in the 1870s, it functioned as a hospital run by the Sisters of Charity. Within its walls, the work was not about conflict or justice, but care, tending to the sick, the injured, and those who had nowhere else to go. And it may be that something of that work never truly stopped. For generations, people have described encountering a figure known only as the Black Robe. The stories come from different times, from different witnesses, many of whom had no connection to one another. The details shift slightly, but the image remains the same. A dark-clad figure moving quietly through the town, sometimes seen standing near the beds of the ill, as if keeping watch. There is no clear identity attached to the figure, but there are suggestions. Among the sisters who served in Virginia City, one name appears again and again, Sister Irene. She was well known in the community, not only for her work in the hospital, but for the time she spent moving through the town itself, visiting the sick in their homes, tending to those in need, and teaching the children of the settlement. If anyone were to linger, some believe it might be someone like her. Accounts tied to the Bonanza Inn tend to be less about sightings and more about presence. Guests have described stepping out of a hot shower into a sudden heavy odor, something clinical, unmistakable, like the scent of a ward where illness lingers. It appears without warning, hangs in the air just long enough to be noticed, and then fades as quickly as it came. Others have awakened to the sound of water being handled nearby, not running through pipes but splashing gently as though poured into a basin, the kind of sound that suggests careful work, deliberate motion. And then there are the footsteps, soft and measured, moving along the hallway in sturdy shoes. In one account, a guest resting alone in the building began to notice the faint rhythm of those steps at the far end of the corridor. They drew closer, unhurried, pausing briefly before the distinct sound of a key turning in a lock. A door opened, closed. A few quiet movements followed inside the room. Then silence. Whoever or whatever had entered seemed to go about their work without concern of being heard. And just as gradually as it began, the presence faded. No door opened again, no footsteps returned. The building settled back into stillness. It is difficult to say what moves through the Bonanza Inn or why it remains, but if the stories are true, it does not seem driven by anger or unrest. It moves with purpose, with routine, as if there is still work to be done. And if you happen to hear those footsteps in the night or catch the faint scent of something clinical in the air, you might take comfort in the thought that someone is still making their rounds, even if no one ever sees them arrive.
Now, not all acts of care happen in the quiet rooms. In places like Butte, they're often stepping directly into danger. So let's talk about the Quartz Street Station. On a winter night in January of 1895, the people of Butte answered a familiar call: fire. It was the kind of alarm the city had grown used to, another blaze in the busy mining town where wood, fuel, and industry existed in close quarters. Firefighters responded quickly, making their way towards the warehouse owned by the Royal Mining Company. What they didn't know was that the nearby buildings were storing large quantities of blasting powder, illegally. As the fire spread, it reached to those stores without warning. The resulting explosion tore through the district with a devastating force. A metal roof was hurtled more than 100 feet into the air. Debris became shrapnel, cutting through the buildings and streets alike. By the time it was over, at least 57 people were dead, and though the true number was probably higher, more than 100 were injured. Among the dead were 13 firefighters, men who had rushed toward the danger without understanding what awaited them. And it was one of the most defining tragedies in Butte's history. It would not be the last. Years later, in 1900, a new fire station was constructed at 17 West Quartz Street, a building that would become known as Fire Station No. 1, now home to Butte's Silver Bow Public Archives. It stood as a symbol of progress, of organization, and of a city trying to bring order to the chaos that once defined it. Within its walls, another story unfolded. Chief Peter Sanger was a man who understood loss. In 1904, his wife, Margaret, died of cancer, leaving him to raise their children all alone. 2 years later, his daughter, Hazel, fell ill while away at school and died before her family could reach her side. In 1908, Sanger remarried. His new wife, Louisa, moved into the residence above the station, a vantage point that overlooked the comings and the goings of the fire crews below. From those windows, she could watch the engines leave at all hours, disappearing into the city with no guarantee of return. And in 1915, that uncertainty became a reality. Responding to a call on one of the newer motorized engines, Sanger and his crew sped through the streets at nearly 40 miles per hour when they collided with a streetcar. The impact threw the men from the vehicle. Though others survived, Sanger suffered severe head injuries. He remained unconscious for a time, but his condition never improved. Weeks later, he traveled with Louisa to California for surgery. He didn't survive. Louisa returned his body to Butte for burial, and not long after, she left the city behind. But the building remained. Today, much of the old station is still intact, the bay doors, the upper windows, that even the rows of lockers once used by the firefighters. It's a place where the past feels close, preserved not just in records, but in the structure and the space itself. And according to some, in presence. Visitors and staff have reported muffled voices drifting through empty rooms. Lights flicker without explanation. Old alarms, long disconnected, seem to echo faintly, as though still answering the calls that no longer come. But the most specific account is quieter. Standing outside the building one day, a staff member happened to glance up towards the eastern window. There, framed by the glass, was an older woman, calmly drying her hands on a dish towel as she looked down toward the street below. The image was so ordinary, so complete, that it did not immediately seem unusual until it was gone. Later, while reviewing the photographs from the building's past, she came across a familiar face, Louisa Sanger. If that is who is still standing at the window, then the reason may not be difficult to imagine. She once watched from above as the man of the station came and went. She carried the weight of the dangerous profession with him onto the streets of Butte. And perhaps even now, she's still watching, waiting for them to return.
But Butte's history wasn't defined by tragedy alone. It was also shaped by the lives people lived, just out of sight. In historic uptown Butte, along Mercury Street, stands a building that carries more than its share of memory. The Dumas brothel is often described as a relic of a different era, a surviving fragment of the city's once thriving red light district. From 1890 until its closure in 1982, it
survived for a while.
It operated continuously, making it one of the longest-running brothels in the United States. Within its walls, lives overlapped in complicated ways, marked by survival, companionship, hardship, and at times, quiet resilience. Above ground, the rooms told one version of that story: well-appointed spaces, elegant furnishings, and the suggestion of refinement offered to paying clients. But below, in the basement and along the back passages, a different reality unfolded. At the rear of the building, a now sealed doorway once opened onto a narrow alley known by several names over the years: Pleasant Alley, Venus Alley, and more bluntly, Piss Alley. It was lined with small one-room cribs where sex workers labored under far harsher conditions. Violence was not uncommon there. Fights, theft, and desperation were part of the environment. The basement of the Dumas, part of what was known as the Burt District, remains one of the last physical reminders of that world. Ownership and management of the brothel shifted over time, but in the mid-20th century, one figure stands out. From 1950 to 1955, the madam of the Dumas was Eleanor Knott. According to local accounts, she had plans to leave. Her bags were packed, a future waiting beyond Butte with a man she intended to meet on a cold February night. But he never arrived. The following morning, Eleanor was found dead. The official cause was listed as natural, though rumors circulated, whispers of something less certain and less easily explained. After her death, Bonita Farron assumed control of the brothel, living in the upstairs apartment with her husband. Bonita remained in charge until her death in 1971, after which the Dumas passed through its final years before closing permanently in 1982. But the closing of the business did not mark the end of activity within the building. Over the years, a number of people have reported encountering a woman moving through the upper floors, often described as carrying a suitcase, as though preparing to leave, but never quite managing to do so. The image has been linked by some to Eleanor, but other experiences suggest a different presence may also linger. Artists, visitors, and employees have described being drawn to a particular face, a woman they cannot quite place. One artist working alone in the upstairs apartment found herself repeatedly attempting to paint the same figure, a woman in her 40s, with a composed expression and a distinct sense of presence. Each attempt felt compelled, as though guided rather than imagined. The image stayed with her long after she left the building. Others have encountered something more immediate. During a private visit, a small group was granted access to parts of the building not typically open to the public. In the basement, where excavation had revealed a sealed room, a preserved crib from decades past, the atmosphere shifted noticeably. The space was sparse, containing only the most basic furnishings, but it carried a weight that was difficult to ignore. While exploring the area, members of the group reported an unusual sensation, as though something brushed lightly against them, like cobwebs that were not there. In the same moment, a shadow moved across the room, quick and deliberate, passing from one corner to another without any visible source. The experience was shared. It was not easily dismissed. Upstairs in what had once been the madam's quarters, the tone changed again. The space felt less oppressive, but no less active. A painting of a woman, identified as Bonita, rested on display, capturing her with a composed expression and a distinctive hat. Those who spent time in the room described a lingering sense of sadness, paired with something more focused and intentional. On one occasion, after leaving the building, a visitor reported a final and unexpected encounter. Waking in the early hours of the morning, they became aware of a presence at the edge of the bed, sitting there, clearly formed and unmistakable. It was the same woman from the upstairs portrait, Bonita. Her appearance matched the painting precisely. She spoke calmly, directly, delivering a simple message, that the building would endure, that it would be preserved, and then she was gone. The experience left behind only the faintest impression, a slight depression in the bedding, and a lingering trace of perfume. In the months that followed, the Dumas did in fact survive a period of uncertainty that had threatened its future. Ownership stabilized, restoration efforts continued, the building remained standing. Today, the Dumas brothel is preserved as a historical site, its doors open to those interested in exploring its past. Tours move carefully through its rooms, tracing the lives that once filled the space. And while much of what happened there can be explained through history alone, not every account fits so neatly. Objects have been known to shift, doors open without cause. Visitors describe cold spots, fleeting shadows, the sensation of being watched. On more than one occasion, figures have been seen moving through the halls when no one else is present. It is difficult to say how many presences remain within the Dumas, or how they might be understood. Some seem tied to hardship, others routine, and a few, if the stories are to be believed, remain invested in what the building becomes. Not every ghost story is about something unresolved. Sometimes it is about something that refuses to be forgotten. And in a place like the Dumas, where so many lives intersected within a single set of walls, that may be the most enduring presence of all.
Not every story from Montana's past is marked by its hardship. Some are quieter, carried in the smallest and most unexpected ways. In Helena, tucked in the hillside just off the main street, Reader's Alley feels like a place that's slightly removed from time. Its stone buildings and narrow walkways speak of an earlier Helena, one shaped by miners, laborers, and the steady rhythms of daily life rather than the rush of modern traffic. And at the top of the alley once stood a large stone mansion, a home to a woman remembered less for her place in history, more for her kindness. Her name was Laura Duchesnay. Laura and her husband, George, both from France, lived there from the 1910s through the early 1930s. Those who knew her, Laura was gentle and attentive, especially when they came to small creatures that were brought to her care. Children in the neighborhood would arrive with injured birds, and Laura would nurse them back to health, returning them to the wild whenever she could. But some birds stayed. Laura had a particular fondness for canaries, bright, delicate songbirds whose quiet chirping filled the rafters of the old stone house. Though they were usually kept in cages, she would sometimes let them out to flutter freely, settling into the beams above and filling the space with soft, steady sound. There were, of course, other uses for the house. During Prohibition, it said that the Duchesnays quietly stored up moonshine there. At certain times of the month, visitors would line the alley, waiting for their turn to enter. If questioned, they could always claim they were simply there to purchase birds. Laura, after all, had plenty. It was the kind of arrangement that blended easily into the rhythms of time. In 1933, Laura fell ill and was taken to St. Peter's Hospital, where she died of an intestinal obstruction. George, heartbroken, asked that she be brought home one final time. There in the house she had filled her life, he released the canaries from their cages. They moved through the rafters as they always had, and for a while the house sounded just like it once did. After her death, George eventually gave the birds away and continued on, managing the property until his own passing in 1940. The house changed over time, eventually becoming a restaurant, its different purpose, but its structure largely the same. And with that, continued help.
And with that continuity came something else.
I'm sorry, my words are failing right now.
Staff and visitors have reported small, unexplainable moments. A sudden cough or sneeze in an empty room. The sound of distant laughter. A shadow passing quietly down a corridor. Nothing overwhelming, nothing that lingers for long. But the most consistent detail is the sound. Late one evening, as preparations were underway for a busy holiday service, a staff member paused at the faint but unmistakable sound of chirping. Concerned that a bird might be trapped inside, she began searching the rooms, following the sound as it grew louder. Then came the rush of wings. A full flutter, as if a small flock had passed overhead. And then nothing. No birds, no movement, only silence. Since then, others have noticed it too. A faint chirping where no birds are kept, a brief flutter in otherwise still air.
It is not an unsettling presence. If anything, it feels familiar. As though, in some quiet way, the stone house at the top of Reader's Alley still holds on to the smallest pieces of Laura's life. And every now and then, it lets them be heard again. The kitties would love that. They would want to chase.
Oh, they would.
Especially this one.
It'd be absolute madness in here.
He would go, birdies. Birdies. Oh, Dan is saying bye-bye.
Have a good night. Thanks for watching.
Yes, and we are at our end for the night.
Yes. So Montana is a place where history doesn't just live in books or museums. It lives in the land. In the buildings that have stood longer than they were ever meant to. In the roads that still follow paths carved out more than a century ago. In the quiet spaces where something once happened and perhaps never fully left. Some of the stories we've shared tonight are rooted in tragedy, others in routine, and a few in something closer to care. But taken together, they suggest something simple, that time in places like this doesn't always move in a straight line. Sometimes it circles back. Sometimes it lingers. And sometimes if you find yourself in the right place at the right moment, you might catch a glimpse of it. A sound, a shadow, a presence that doesn't quite belong to the present. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, Montana has a way of holding on to its past. And every now and then, it lets you know it's still there. Thank you for watching.
Yes.
Hope you enjoyed the stories. And as we noted, we will not be back again this month. At least that's not the plan right now. There's a lot going on for us between now and then. So we are going to plan to be back in the beginning of June.
Yep, June 1st is when we're hoping to be back without a problem.
And we will, we'll drop an episode. Just keep an eye on our Facebook, on the Facebook events, and we'll drop the topic.
Yes.
So.
And hopefully we will get some more vlogs out this next month.
Yes, yep. Keep an eye on the TikTok. So keep an eye on TikTok, on the Facebook Reels, on the YouTube Shorts. It's all the same thing. I mean, we just
because we can't do a full session doesn't mean we won't do a little storytelling here and there.
Yep. So appreciate y'all tuning in. And with that, even though we're not going to be doing really long format stories here on Facebook for a few weeks, again, we've got the short form stuff that we'll be posting, and most importantly at all, tours going available every night. We had Churchill tonight. Marcia was out there.
That's who texted me. She was letting me know she was done.
Yep. Tomorrow night, coincidentally, Churchill again. It's going to be Lee. Wednesday, Shaka Bottom with Jenny.
Yep.
And on and on. Of course, next weekend and next week. And yes.
It keeps going. Because we're moving towards busy season.
Spooky stuff all the time. So hope you can come on out and see us on a tour soon. And until next time.
Bye-bye.
Stay spooky, y'all.